Hello everyone, I hope you're well today. I've got a special book today. It's a book of poems. I'm sure you've heard poems before. What's that, Connie? Oh, Connie the clownfish says she loves this book because it's the same colour as her. Isn't she funny? The first poem I'm going to read is called Three Little Foxes. Once upon a time there were three little foxes who didn't wear stockings and they didn't wear sockses. But they all had handkerchiefs to blow their noses and they kept their handkerchiefs in cardboard boxes. They lived in the forest in three little houses and they didn't wear coats and they didn't wear trousers. They ran through the woods on their little bare tootsies and they played touch last with a family of mouses. They didn't go shopping in the high street shopses, but caught what they wanted in woods and in copses. They all went fishing and they caught three wormses. They went out hunting and they caught three wopses. They went to a fair and they won all the prizes, 3 plum puddingses and 3 mince pieses. They rode on elephants and swang on swingses and hit 3 coconuts at coconut shizes. That's all that I know of the 3 little foxes who kept their handkerchiefs in cardboard boxes. They lived in the forest in 3 little houses, but they didn't wear coats and they didn't wear trousers and they didn't wear stockings and they didn't wear sockses. And here's a picture of the 3 little foxes at the fair, winning all the prizes. There's some funny words in that poem, aren't there? This one's called Disobedience. James, Morrison, Weatherby, George, Dupree took great care of his mother, although he was only 3. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me." James Morrison's mother put on a golden gown. James Morrison's mother drove to the end of the town. James Morrison's mother said to herself, said she, "Well, I can get right down to the end of the town and be back in time for tea." King John put up a notice, "Lost or stolen or strayed. James Morrison's mother seems to have been mislaid. Last seen wandering vaguely, quite of her own accord, she tried to get down to the end of the town. $40 reward." James Morrison, commonly known as Jim, told his other relations, well, not to go blaming him. James said to his mother, "Mother," he said he, "you must never go down to the end of the town without consulting me." James Morrison's mother hasn't been heard of since. King John said he was sorry, and so did the Queen and Prince. King John, somebody told me, said to a man he knew, "Well, if people go down to the end of the town, well, what can anyone do?" JMMWG Dupree took great care of his although he was only 3. JJ said to his he said he, "You must never go down to the end of the town if you don't go down with me." The end. I think she would have been all right. This is one of my favourite AAMilne poems. It's called The King's Breakfast. The King asked the Queen, and the Queen asked the dairymaid, "Oh, could we have some butter for the royal slice of bread?" The Queen asked the dairymaid. The dairymaid said, "Certainly. I'll go and tell the cow now before she goes to bed." The dairymaid, she curtsied and went and told the Alderney. "Don't forget the butter for the royal slice of bread." The Alderney said sleepily, "You'd better tell His Majesty that many people nowadays like marmalade instead. Moo." The dairymaid said, "Fancy," and went to Her Majesty. She curtsied to the Queen, and she turned a little red. "Excuse me, Your Majesty, for taking of the liberty, but marmalade is tasty if it's very thickly spread." The Queen said, "Oh," and went to His Majesty. "Talking of the butter for the royal slice of bread, many people think that marmalade is nicer. Would you like to try a little bit of marmalade instead?" And here's a picture of the dairymaid talking to the cow, asking for some butter. And here's a picture of the dairymaid with the marmalade. And there's the Queen. The King said, "Bother!" And then he said, "Oh, dearie me." The King sobbed, "Oh, dearie me," and went back to bed. "Nobody," he whimpered, "could call me a fussy man. I only want a little bit of butter for my bread." The Queen said, "Oh, there, there," and went to the dairymaid. The dairymaid said, "There, there," and went to the shed. The cow said, "Oh, there, there, I didn't really mean it. Here's milk for his porridge and butter for his bread." The Queen took the butter and brought it to Her Majesty. The King said, "Butter, eh?" and bounced out of bed. "Nobody," he said, as he kissed her tenderly. "Nobody," he said, as he slid down the banisters. "Nobody, my darling, could call me a fussy man, but I do like a little bit of butter on my bread." So do I. Goodbye. Goodbye from Connie. Wave both fins.